Hello, writers, and welcome to the Author Burnout Coach, the show where we put the publishing industry and all sorts of societal messaging under a microscope. I'm your host, Isabel Sterling, YA author and certified life coach. In each episode, I offer you specific steps that you can take to break up with burnout and reclaim your love of stories. I'm on a mission to dismantle the bookish hustle culture, one writer at a time. I hope you'll join me. Hey writers, welcome to episode 18, and I want you to know I have a little bit of a rant, but it is maybe it's more tough love. Maybe it's more tough love than a rant, because it is very much based in love. And it's something that I've done a lot in my past. It's something that I catch myself trying to do still to this day, but it's something that I think is so detrimental to us as human beings owning our power and authority and agency over our lives. Here it is. We have got to stop crowdsourcing for approval. It is so disempowering, and it truly robs us of our connection with our own authority. If you know what you want, I want you to just fucking own it and go after it. You don't need your family or your friends or random people on the internet to validate your choice and prove to you that it's okay to go after it. You know best what it is that you want, and I want you to own that. Okay, let me back up and explain to you what I mean. Because, of course, I'm not saying that you can't ever talk to your friends and family and loved ones for advice and that you can't, bounce ideas off of them. That's not at all what I'm saying. It's a very specific thing that I see happening that I call crowdsourcing for approval. So this can happen with both large and small decisions. So let's say you want to quit your day job to write full time. It can be a fairly large decision, right? So if deep down you know that that is what you want to do, but you're afraid to just come right out and make the decision and quit that job, you find yourself tiptoeing over to social media or into a text chain with your writer friends and you're asking for advice. Except you're not actually asking for advice. You don't want their advice. You think you do, but what you're really doing is just looking for validation that you're making the right decision. And you're doing this if you find yourself glossing over all of the advice and all of the warnings that are contrary to what you want, and you're only plucking out the advice that validates your decision, and you use that as approval to go after your goal. And while this might mean that you still make the decision that you had originally wanted to make, you have completely abdicated your authority over your life. You gave that power to somebody else, and I want you to stop doing that shit. Stop telling yourself you don't know what you want. You do. I promise you do. You're probably out of practice listening to that part of you that knows, but you know. And when you can own that, it can change everything. Other times, you use this approval crowdsourcing against yourself and against your dreams. So we'll stick with the day job example. Maybe deep down you want to leave, but you also think it's too scary to leave, or you're worried that everybody else is going to think you're irresponsible. So again, you put out that call on social media or in your text threads or whatever, and you ignore all the advice that tells you to go for it, and you hyper focus on all the people who warn you about how it's going to ruin your life and leave you broke and miserable. So now you've collected all this so-called proof that what you want is a bad idea, and you never own the fact that you are the one choosing to believe that people will think you irresponsible. You never own the fact that you are currently thinking that it's irresponsible. You outsource that to other people. You lose the opportunity to unpack that belief and decide on purpose whether you're willing to build your life around trying to control other people's thoughts about you. And honestly, spoiler, you cannot control other people's thoughts about you. You cannot manipulate people into thinking that they like you more than they do, because then they're not actually liking you. They're liking the version of you that you've created for them. And I want you to say there's no shade either way, whether you decide to quit the job or decide you don't want to because you don't want to feel irresponsible. that's fine. Just own that choice. Know that you made it for those reasons instead of delegating your decision power to people on the internet or friends or whoever it is that you're seeking approval from. And that example does also include your parents if you are choosing to stay in the job because you know they've said to you before that it's more responsible, but at least you know that you're making decisions in the hopes of getting their approval. You are doing that on purpose and you're aware of it. This is actually something that I had to go through when I decided to quit my day job. And this is not a podcast about quitting your day job and whether it's better or worse to do it. That's just the example I happened to pick. So when I was going through this, I caught myself in that moment where I had been thinking about this for a long time. I had all these plans about what I would want to do before I left and all of that. And when I finally decided, you know what, today's the day I'm just going to put in my notice, I caught myself wanting to check in with my friends and get their approval or get their sign off before I actually sent the resignation email. But as I was, pulling out my phone and getting ready to text them, I noticed this feeling inside that if my friends had tried to talk me out of quitting, I would have ignored them. And if they said that it was a good idea, I would have, felt more reassured. And because of that, I knew that I wanted to leave. I knew that I had made up my mind and I chose to trust myself, to trust my own gut and my own instincts and actually follow through and then tell them after the fact. Now, this might seem like a small distinction, but it matters so, so much. We have been taught, especially those of us socialized as women, that authority lies outside of ourselves. We are taught, both implicitly and explicitly, that authority belongs to men, and specifically cishet, able-bodied white men who come from money. I remember one time walking through a medical college where I was an intern, and on the wall there were all of these pictures, portraits of past presidents, and every single fucking one of them was a white dude. And it just sort of reinforces that, oh, that's who has authority. That's who's in charge. That's who gets to make big decisions. And I say, fuck that noise. But because we see that over and over and over, we start to believe, often subconsciously, that we should not trust our own knowing of ourselves. We are socialized to believe that we don't have authority over ourselves and our dreams and our futures. And that matters. And because this is something that we're taught our entire lives, this is not permission to feel shame about it. It is not a personal failure. It is something nearly all of us have to unlearn, and awareness is the first step. I used to do this all the time, and I still catch myself wanting to give my authority away to others, thinking that somebody else knows the right way. Somebody else knows the perfect way to write a book. Somebody else knows the right way to revise this. Somebody else would know the right step forward. It is so normal and so pervasive that even noticing that it's happening and being like, hey, that's that thing that we all do, that is a huge step worth celebrating. And as we're able to unwind this pattern, as we start to trust that we do in fact know best who we are and what we want and what will help us achieve our goals, we undermine the patriarchy, which, one of my favorites. We make it harder for the patriarchy to convince us to play small. Now, I know there are some cis dudes who follow this podcast. Hello, friends. You are not exempt from suffering under the patriarchy, even if it doesn't affect you to the same degree or the same way as the rest of us. You might also find yourself crowdsourcing for approval, especially if you're somebody who occupies other marginalized identity. Maybe you're a BIPOC person, maybe you're part of the LGBTQ community, maybe you grew up in poverty. So you might also see authority as belonging to other people. Or those of you who are those white cishet dudes, you may have been taught your whole life, you were likely taught your whole life that you would be somebody who would have authority. And so you might accidentally, sort of unintentionally find yourself thinking that you have the answers and you have more authority and you can help people. Again, there is no need to feel shame about this. Just learn to recognize it and practice reminding yourself that every human has inherent authority over their life and over their goals. You do not know better than them. I actually think this is a lot of where the like mansplaining comes from, is men are just taught that they are authority holders. And a lot of these guys who do this, they're not intentionally being like, oh, I'm so much better than everybody else. It's not that at all. It's, oh, I have this knowledge. Maybe it'll help this person. Not realizing that other people can have their own authority. With that said, just because we want to stop crowdsourcing for approval, that doesn't mean we never ask for advice or guidance. We can absolutely ask for help. You just want to be clear with yourself on when it is that you're looking for information versus when you're simply seeking external approval because you're unwilling to give it to yourself. And that is so key. You have to be willing to give yourself approval. Nobody else can do that for you. Nobody else, even if they do, like come to you and say like, yes, I approve of all of your decisions, you're still going to have this layer of doubt until you decide to give yourself your own approval. So we'll use a different example now. We'll get off the day job thing for a second. Let's say that you are interested in independently publishing your novel rather than pursuing traditional publication. Crowdsourcing approval in this instance might look like maybe you go on Twitter and say like, hey, what's better, indie pub or trad pub? And then as you get all these answers, you mentally sort of discount all the people who say trad is better and you believe everyone that says indie is better. All you're doing in that case is looking for evidence that you're making the right choice and you're filtering everything through that lens. You might not even ask the question, you could simply Google it, and then you're dismissing any articles that have any negative things to say about indie publishing, especially if they shit talk indie, which is fair. Articles that shit talk any path of publication can just be ignored. Any articles that shit talk any particular genre, ignore them. That's fine. There is no one path that's perfect, and anybody who says otherwise is full of shit. Everything has pros and cons and reasons that make it good for some people and not for others. But when you crowdsource like that, you are denying yourself the chance to own your choice, to own that you want to indie publish, and to like your reasons. So instead, let's say you show up to the world and say like, hey, I'm planning to indie publish my work. I already know that means I will have to X, Y, and Z, and I'm willing to make that trade in order to have A, B, and C. Is there anything else I might not have considered? And then when people respond, you can run their thoughts through your own internal authority. You can say to yourself things like, oh yes, I did consider that and I still like my decision. Or no, I actually didn't think about it that. Let me think about it and see if it impacts my choice. This difference may seem really subtle, but I want you to trust me when I say that it is truly so huge. This allows you to retain ownership of your decision-making process and at the same time staying open to alternate perspectives. And that allows you to make sort of the best decisions without giving your authority to other people. Okay, so here is your episode homework should you choose to accept it. And you do get to decide because you are the boss of you. The next time you find yourself wanting to ask for advice, check in with yourself and ask these questions. 1, what am I hoping people will say? And 2, what am I afraid that they'll say? What am I hoping they won't say? And if there are clear answers to those questions, you probably already know what it is you want to do. See if you're willing to just own that decision and start to follow through. And if you still feel like you need some more information, if there's something in you that says, I think I'm missing a perspective here, try to reframe it in a way that makes it clear, at least to yourself, that you know what you want your decision to be, and you're just checking for any holes in your knowledge that might affect that decision. Okay. And I'm also holding myself to this. Like I said, I still catch myself trying to do this, and it has been so powerful the times where I have noticed it and not done it and just owned for myself that this is what I want. I mean, that was a whole lot of this last month of deciding, last few months of deciding I'm leaving my day job and I'm going to go to full-time author and coach and I'm going to do this podcast and all of those things. I just stopped waiting for somebody to give me permission and just went and did it. All right, my friends, I invite you to stop crowdsourcing approval, own your decisions, and enjoy the hell out of your writing this week. All right? I'll see you next week. Bye. If you enjoyed this podcast, then you've got to get on my email list. You'll get my best advice sent right to your inbox with concrete steps on how to stay in love with writing and banish burnout for good. Go to isabelsterling.com/join to sign up. When you do, you'll get one of my favorite worksheets, the 5 causes of writer's block. I teach you how to diagnose why you're stuck and how to get writing again. That's isabelsterling.com/join. See you next week.